No. There is a kind of silence that does not feel like peace. It feels like holding your breath underwater, not because you chose to, but because coming up for air costs too much. I know that silence well. I lived in it for years. My name is not important right now. What is important is that I am the kind of man who shows up, who fixes things, who writes the check, makes the call, drives the hour and a half on a Sunday because someone needs something. I was always that man. And for a long time, I thought that made me good. I thought if I kept showing up, eventually the people I was showing up for would look at me, really look, and say, "We see you. We're glad you're here." They never did. But this story is not about the years I spent waiting for that moment. This story is about the morning I stopped waiting, and what happened 3 weeks later when my younger sister and her fiancé walked through the front door of a place they had no idea belonged to me. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up in a house in Columbus, Ohio, where love was distributed unevenly, like the last piece of pie at Thanksgiving. My younger sister Camille always got the bigger slice. That is just the truth. I am not saying it with bitterness anymore. I am saying it the way you say it started raining, or the car needs new tires. Factual. Observable. Something you learn to plan around. Camille was 6 years younger than me, and from the moment she arrived, she rearranged the furniture of our family without even trying. My mother softened in a way I had never seen. My father laughed more. I was 9 years old watching all of this happen, and I told myself it was fine. She was the baby. Of course they were excited. I kept telling myself it was fine for the next 20 years. I was the one who got a job at 16 to pay for my own school clothes. I was the one who took out loans for community college while my parents co-signed a private university for Camille without blinking. I was the one who called every Sunday, showed up for every holiday, drove my mother to her appointments when her knee was bad. I did all of it quietly, without a receipt, without keeping score. At least I told myself I wasn't keeping score. Camille graduated with a communications degree and immediately fell in love with a man named Derek. Derek was the kind of person who took up space in a room without filling it, loud without being funny, confident without being competent. He had a firm handshake and a story for every occasion, most of which I suspected were not entirely true. But my parents loved him. My mother called him charming. My father said he had a good head on his shoulders. I tried. I genuinely tried with Derek. I invited them both to dinner. I asked about his work. He was in sales, always in between big opportunities. I listened. I nodded. And every single time, I walked away feeling like I had been subtracted from somehow. Like Derek looked at me and calculated exactly what I was worth to him and then filed the number away for later. The first time he made a comment about my truck, I laughed it off. It was an older model, nothing fancy, but it ran clean and I owned it outright. He said, in front of my whole family at Christmas, "Man, you still driving that thing? I thought you would have upgraded by now." And everyone chuckled like he had made a great observation. I said, "It gets me where I'm going." He said, "Sure, sure," and looked at Camille in a way that said, "See what I mean?" I noticed. I always noticed. I just kept it quiet. The second time was at my parents' anniversary dinner. I had arranged the whole thing. Reserved the restaurant, handled the cake, picked up my grandmother from her apartment 40 minutes away. When we sat down, Derek pulled out his phone, showed everyone pictures of a lake house he was thinking about renting for a weekend, and for the next 40 minutes, the dinner I had organized became a travel planning session for Derek's vacation. My mother said, "Derek, you were so thoughtful, always thinking about fun things for the family." I sat across the table and smiled. The third time was the one I should have let be the last time. But I didn't, because I am the kind of man who shows up, and I had not yet learned that showing up for people who do not see you is not loyalty. It is just a habit you have not broken yet. It was a Sunday in February. Camille called me, not to ask how I was doing, not to catch up, but because Derek's car had broken down and they needed someone to cover the tow and the repair until things loosened up financially. The number she mentioned was $1,100. I asked how things were going with Derek's job. She said, "It's just a slow month. You know how sales is." I did not know how sales was. I had been working the same steady, unglamorous operations job for 6 years. The kind of work where you learn the systems underneath things. Logistics, supply chains, the mechanics of how businesses actually move. Not glamorous. Not the kind of thing you bring up at Christmas dinner. But consistent, reliable. Mine. I sent the $1,100. 3 months later, Camille called again. This time it was rent. She said Derek had a deal almost closed. It would clear everything up. They just needed a bridge. The number was $2,200. I sent it. I want to be honest with you about why. It was not because I did not see what was happening. Some part of me saw it clearly. It was because I still believed, in some stubborn, unkillable part of my chest, that if I held on long enough, if I gave enough, if I proved my worth in the only currency my family seemed to recognize, eventually the scales would tip. Eventually, someone would say my name with the same warmth they used for Derek. That is a painful thing to admit. But I think you might know that feeling too. The engagement announcement came in March. Big party at my parents' house, catered, string lights in the backyard, the whole thing. My mother cried happy tears. My father shook Derek's hand for a long time. I stood in the kitchen for a while, refilling the chip bowl, because it gave me something to do with my hands. Derek found me in the kitchen. He looked at me in that measuring way he had, and he said, "Hey, so Camille and I have been talking about the wedding venue. We found this incredible place about an hour outside the city, Harrowfield Estate. You know it?" I kept my face neutral. "I've heard of it. It's not cheap," he said, smiling like that was charming. "But you know how Camille is. She wants what she wants. We figured since you've been so helpful lately," he put helpful in a tone that made it sound like something lesser than the word deserved, "maybe you'd want to contribute, like be part of making it happen." I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "Let me think about it." He nodded, already moving away, already sure of what my answer would be. That night, I sat in my truck in my parents' driveway for a long time before driving home. I did not think about Derek. I thought about the chip bowl. I thought about the way my mother had looked at him when he walked in, that open, unguarded softness, and the way she looked at me, which was warmer than neutral but never quite that. I thought about $1,100 and $2,200, and all the Sundays and the anniversary dinner and the 20 years of being the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who gets where he's going in an old truck and doesn't make a fuss about it. I thought, when does this stop? And for the first time, I did not have a reason to keep going. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table, and I made a decision that felt surprisingly less like giving up and more like setting something heavy down. After carrying it so long, I had forgotten it was not part of my body. I was not going to contribute to the wedding venue. I was not going to contribute to anything else. I was going to stop. 2 weeks later, the wedding planning went into full swing, and the group chat my family used for logistics became something I opened with a low-grade dread every morning. There were venue tours, catering tastings, guest list debates. I responded when addressed directly and said nothing otherwise. Then came the message that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening. I was at my desk finishing a report when my phone lit up with the family group chat. The message was from Derek, not Camille, Derek, and it said, "Hey everyone, Camille and I have talked about this, and we want the wedding to feel really polished and put together. We love everyone, but we also want the photos and the vibe to be consistent. My name, we think it's probably better if you don't come to the engagement party at the Hendersons next Saturday. Nothing personal, just want the group to feel cohesive. Hope you understand." I read it twice. Then I watched the responses come in. My mother sent a heart emoji. My father sent a thumbs up. My aunt wrote, "Good thinking, planning a wedding is so stressful, you have to do what's right for you both." I set my phone face down on the desk. I sat there for a while, not crying, not shaking, just very, very still. The way you go still when something you half expected finally arrives, and the shock is not the thing itself, but the clarity it brings with it. I picked up my phone, I opened the group chat, and I typed 2 words, "Understood. Congratulations." Then I put my phone in my desk drawer and I finished my report. What no one in that group chat knew, what I had never mentioned to my family, not once, not in passing, not even indirectly, was what I actually did for work. I told you I worked in operations and logistics. That was true. 6 years ago. What had happened in those 6 years was something I had not announced, had not celebrated at family dinners, had not brought up when Derek was talking about his almost closed deals. I had spent those years learning the back end of how commercial properties ran. I had taken on a partner. I had acquired over time 3 properties in the Columbus metro area, all of them operating, all of them profitable. One of them was a mid-size event venue about 40 minutes outside the city. Its name was Harrowfield Estate. I want to be clear, I did not plan this. I did not engineer some elaborate situation where I waited for them to pick my venue and then sprung a trap. Life is not a movie. What happened was simply that I owned a thing they needed and they did not know I owned it because they had never thought to ask what I actually did. No one had ever asked. My property manager, a steady woman named Renata, who had been with me for 3 years, called me on a Tuesday afternoon in April. She said, "Hey, I have a couple here, finalizing a deposit for a June wedding. They're asking about a payment plan because they're about $600 short of the full deposit. I told them I'd check with you. Name on the reservation is Camille." I was quiet for a moment. I said, "What's the last name?" She told me. I said, "I'll call you back." I sat with that for the rest of the afternoon. I could have let Renata handle it. I could have had her decline the payment plan, let them find another venue, never involved myself directly. That would have been the clean version. But I thought about the group chat. I thought about the heart emoji and the thumbs up. I thought about 20 years of chip bowls and tow trucks and money sank quietly in the night. And I thought, I would like them to see me. Just once. Not on my terms, not staged, not performed. Just, I would like them to walk into a room and understand, without me saying a single word, who I am. I called Renata back. I told her to schedule the final walkthrough and deposit meeting for Saturday morning and to let them know the owner would be present. Saturday came. I got to Harrowfield an hour early. I walked the property the way I always did, checking in with the weekend staff, reviewing the setup for a small event that afternoon, signing off on a vendor delivery. By the time I was sitting in the main office with a cup of coffee and the reservation file open on my laptop, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Calm. Completely, solidly calm. The door opened at 10 o'clock. Camille came in first. She looked beautiful. She always did. And she was mid-sentence talking to Derek behind her, her eyes scanning the room for whoever they were meeting. Then her eyes found me, and the sentence stopped. Derek walked in behind her and pulled up short. I looked at them both. I did not smile big. I did not make a speech. I just said, "Good morning. I'm glad you found the place okay. Have a seat." Neither of them moved for a moment. Camille said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I own it." The silence in that room was a different kind than the one I had been living in for 20 years. That silence had been mine, something I carried. This one belonged to all three of us, and it was Derek who broke it first. He laughed, short, uncomfortable. "You're kidding." "I'm not." He looked around the room at the framed photos on the wall, the awards from the County Business Association, the operational certifications, the property documents visible in the open binder on my desk, and something shifted in his face. Something that had always been positioned slightly above me quietly rearranged itself. Camille sat down. She looked at her hands. Derek stayed standing. He said, "Okay, well, this is great, actually. So you can work something out with us on the deposit, right? Keep it in the family." I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the word family. I thought about who he meant when he said it. I thought about the engagement party I had not been invited to because I did not fit the vibe. I thought about the thumbs up. I said, "Our policy is full deposit at signing." Renata already explained the terms. "Right, but if you're 600 short, that's something you'll need to resolve before we can hold the date. I can give you until end of day Monday." He stared at me. "You're serious?" "I am." Camille looked up. Her eyes were wet. She said quietly, "Why didn't you ever tell us?" And I thought about that question for a second. The honest answer was, because you never asked. Because every room I walked into with this family, the air was already full of Derek's almost closed deals and Camille's plans and my parents' pride in the life they had built for her. There was never a pause long enough for me to say, "Here is what I have been doing. Here is who I am becoming. Here is the thing I have built, quietly in the hours after everyone stopped paying attention." But I did not say all of that. I just said it didn't come up. She nodded. She looked back at her hands. Derek tried once more. He said, "Look, man, I know things have been, I know I haven't always been." He stopped. Started over. "You're going to make this difficult, aren't you?" I said, "I'm applying the same terms I apply to every client. That's not difficult. That's just business." He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they have run out of moves. They left 20 minutes later. Deposit unresolved. Date unconfirmed. I sat in the office for a while after they were gone. Renata knocked on the door and asked if everything was okay. I told her yes. She gave me a look that said she understood more than I had told her, and she closed the door quietly behind her. My phone buzzed. A text from Camille. It said, "I didn't know. I want you to know that I didn't know what you had, and I don't know if that makes it better or worse." I read it twice. Then I typed back, "It doesn't make it better or worse. It just is what it is." I set my phone down and looked out the window at the grounds of Harrowfield, the old stone building, the willow trees along the back fence, the white chair stacked neatly by the garden gate for the afternoon event. I had bought this place 22 months ago. I had spent weekends learning its systems, its vendors, its quirks. I had never taken a photo of it for Instagram. I had never brought my family here for a tour. I had just worked, quietly and without an audience, the way I always had. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. She wrote, "Camille told me." I had no idea, sweetheart. I just had no idea. I stared at the word sweetheart for a long time. It was not that she had never called me that. It was the timing of it, the way it arrived now, when there was something visible to respond to. When the evidence was too large to look past. I wrote back, "I know, Mom." I did not write, "I needed you to see me before the evidence." I needed it to not require proof. I needed you to be curious about my life the way you were curious about Derek's next deal or Camille's next plan. I needed you to ask. I did not write any of that, because it was true, and also because saying it would not undo the years, and I had gotten to a place, sitting in that office, on a Saturday morning April, with the sun coming through the window and the afternoon event coming together outside, where I did not need to undo them anymore. The years were the years. The money I sent was sent. The Sundays I showed up for were shown up for. I did not regret being the kind of man who does those things. I only regretted doing them while shrinking. Doing them while apologizing for my presence. Doing them while waiting to be seen. That part was over. Camille and Derek found a different venue. I heard through my father that the wedding was moved to late fall. I was not invited, and I did not expect to be, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, not being invited did not feel like a verdict. It just felt like information. My mother called me the following Sunday. We talked for 40 minutes. It was the longest uninterrupted conversation we had had in years. She asked about the business. She asked how I was doing, actually doing. She asked if I was seeing anyone. She listened when I answered. It was not everything. It was not 20 years of Sundays I had needed her to show up for. But it was something, and I have learned to take something seriously, to not dismiss it because it is not everything. My father texted me a week after that. He said, "I owe you a real conversation. Let me know when you're free." I said, "How's Saturday?" He said, "Saturday works." We met for breakfast at a diner off Route 40 that we used to go to when I was a kid. He ordered the same thing he always ordered. Eggs over easy. Wheat toast, black coffee. I ordered the same thing I always ordered. We sat across from each other, and for the first 20 minutes we talked about nothing important. The weather, his truck, a neighbor's fence dispute. And then my father set down his coffee cup and looked at me in a way I did not fully recognize. Careful and a little ashamed, and more present than I was used to. And he said, "I think we missed a lot with you. I think your mother and I got comfortable assuming you were fine." I let that sit there between us. Then I said, "I was fine. I made myself fine." He nodded. "That's what worries me." I did not know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just picked up my coffee and looked out the window at the parking lot, at the ordinary Saturday morning going about its business outside. We paid the check and we hugged in the parking lot, and it was a real hug. The kind where you feel the other person actually there, not performing the gesture, but meaning it. I drove home in my truck, newer model now, though I did not buy it to prove anything, and I thought about what my father had said. That's what worries me. I think what he meant was, the person who makes himself fine in the silence, who builds things in the hours no one is watching, who sends the money and drives the distance and shows up without being asked, that person is not invisible because he is small. He is invisible because the people around him stopped being curious, and he stopped requiring them to be. I had stopped requiring them to be. That was the thing I was changing. Not with a speech, not with a confrontation in the family group chat, not with the kind of moment you see in movies where everything is finally said and tears are shed and years of distance collapse in a single conversation, just quietly, the same way I had always done everything. Except this time, the quiet was mine. Not the quiet of holding my breath. The quiet of a man who has set down something heavy and is learning, slowly, what it feels like to stand up straight. I still show up. That has not changed. I am still the kind of man who answers the phone, who drives the distance, who writes the check when something is genuinely needed. But I show up as myself now, with my name on the building, with my history visible to anyone who thinks to ask, with the full knowledge that I do not have to earn my place in a room I already own. If there is something I want you to take from this, if you are sitting somewhere right now, recognizing some version of yourself in what I have said, it is this. The people who overlook you are not always doing it out of cruelty. Sometimes they are just doing it out of habit, and habits can change, but only when you stop making it easy for them to continue. Stop making it easy, not with anger, not with ultimatums, just by becoming, fully and without apology, the person you have already been building in the silence. Let them walk into the room. Let them look around. Let them understand, without a single word from you, who you are. That is enough. That has always been enough. If this story stayed with you, just say the word listening in the comments. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.